Thank you for taking some time to check in on what I read this week. One of the things that I want to do this year is to just share some of the things that I'm reading. I love books. I love paper books. I love ebooks. I love audiobooks. I love reading. I love stories. And there are different levels of reading that I'm going to be going through throughout the year. And so I'm going to be reading a lot of fiction, but I also, as a pastor, I read theology and ministry books as well. And so I'm going to talk about those in this. And so this is going to be kind of a hodgepodge of what is Jason reading and Jason Talks Books. And so this week, I finished a book that it took me a long time to read, not because it was a bad book, but because it was something that I really needed to think through and consider and process. And so the first book I'm going to share with you is called The Pastor in a Secular Age by Andrew Root. And this is the second book in a series. The first one is Faith Formation in a Secular Age, and it was looking at how a culture that is obsessed with youthfulness can help people grow into maturity. And Root deals with this idea of a secular age, and he's building on principles from Charles Taylor, A Secular Age, and his other writings. But then also there's a lot of Karl Barth's influence in his writing. This book in particular, and it says on the byline here, is ministry to people who no longer need a God. And so what Root is trying to do in this text is he's trying to help pastors understand what is our job? What do people expect from us? And that is, you would think that, that's got to be easy, right? You do sermons, you do weddings and funerals, and you're just there and you help people. But what does that help look like in this age when people aren't really thinking about the church in the same way? And so what Root does, he divides the book into a couple parts. And the first part is looking at historical pastors and some significant moments in their ministry, which was very insightful, very interesting. And then the second part, which I really loved, he looks at God and how God is a pastor and how we as followers of Jesus today can enter into the redemptive work of the Lord and be like him in meeting people in their moments of pain, helping people find their identity, and recognizing that he's leading us as pastors, and we get to be a part of helping lead others to the Lord as well. And so I really enjoyed this book. I would highly recommend it. I think it will take some work, and I would encourage pastors, if you're watching this, to go ahead and read The Pastor in a Secular Age by Andrew Root. Now, the second book that I want to share with you is kind of a silly book. It's not silly in like it's insignificant, but it's a silly reason how I came about this book. I went to Barnes & Noble, my local Barnes & Noble in Alderwood, which I love. I love those folks. And I go there regularly, and I saw that they had a Barnes & Noble reading challenge, and so a book a week is on their challenge, and I'm going to try to do that. And I would love for you to join me, for you to try to find some books to read every week. And you may be late, so just jump in on week 2. That's fine. But the first week was a book with a rabbit on the cover, and I didn't really understand why, but I was like, okay, whatever. Come to find out, it's the year of the rabbit. So I have always wanted to read, and I've been putting it off for as long as I've known it existed, but I wanted to read it. I've wanted to read Watership Down, which there, boom, rabbit on the cover. And this book was something that I saw in my library and in school growing up. But famously, it was the book that Sawyer was reading on Lost. And I was like, why would they choose that book? Why Watership Down? And so I didn't know anything really about this book other than there's rabbits. Growing up, I read the Redwall series, and so I didn't know what to expect. That's like a high fantasy animal story, which is fun, and I have them right there on the shelf down there. But Watership Down is about a group of rabbits and different colonies of rabbits who have to survive, and they are dealing with displacement from their their community and moving into other communities and having to deal with humanity and the role of humans in shaping the landscape, as well as conflict with other rabbit colonies or warrens. And so what Adams does here, Richard Adams, is he really made me care about these rabbits, which I didn't know if that was possible. I really cared about Fiver and Hazel and all the different critters in this story. And I was surprised how much I liked this book, and thinking about its connection to Lost. Then, like the fact that Sawyer is reading this book about a community that's trying to create a new community and survive while there is this mysterious stuff happening that's outside of their control, and whole nother colony, the others, out there, and trying to figure out how do we live amongst these folks. It was actually a very smart selection to just have Sawyer reading this book and never really explaining why, which is kind of the reason Lost did what it did, would never really explain anything, and just left us all frustrated. But this, Watership Down. If you haven't read Watership Down, I highly recommend it. It was very good. Another book that I finished this week, and this book I finished as an audiobook. As I said, I love all kinds of books. I'm not a purist of reading, but it was The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin. And I have been working through the list of Hugo winners, which is an annual award that fans vote on for speculative fiction. So mostly science fiction, but there's also some fantasy elements involved. And N.K. Jemisin is just a quick nominee to the Hugo list over the last several years. She wrote the Broken Earth trilogy, and all three of those were nominated, and all three won in consecutive years. She's just that good. And so Jemisin, in this book, is a sequel to The City We Became. And The City We Became reminded me of the idea of principalities and powers in the Bible, and how there's this battle in the book of Daniel where Daniel is praying, and the archangel can't get to him because he's battling the prince of Persia, right? And this is what Jemisin does is, let's imagine that these different cities have avatars, and these avatars are alive and well in the world today. And so she focuses in on New York and the boroughs of New York in particular. So we have the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island, the 5 boroughs of New York. And they all are coming into an awareness of their cityness in these different boroughs to become one city. So then there's another avatar, Neek, as is pronounced. And so the conflict between the boroughs and their unification. Staten Island is out here on its own, kind of doing their own thing. But it's really well crafted storytelling, character building, world building. Jemisin is just one of the great writers of our time. And whether or not you want to agree with Jemisin on sexuality and identity and all these different things, that's a different conversation altogether. I'm just saying, like, Jemisin is really good at writing books. And so this, I enjoyed this book. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but if you are somebody who likes science fiction and speculative fiction, then I really don't think you can go wrong with Jemisin as a writer. And and so the World We Became continues on from the city we became to the world we make. Sorry. It continues on into the story after the boroughs came together in this, after the city we became, but they had to continue the battle against the forces from outside that are trying to bring harm not just to New York, but to all the cities of the world. And then there's some multiversal shenanigans we get introduced to Atlantis. There's all kinds of really great stuff. This book took some turns that I was not entirely prepared for, and I was like, oh, whoa, we're doing this. So, so The World We Make, also recommend. Now, I like to like things, and so maybe you might watch this and be like, Jason, do you ever give a non-recommend to a video? And I probably will at some point, but this first week, I'm liking what I read. This coming week, I'm hoping to finish How High We Go in the Dark by, Sequoia is their last name. But I'm hoping to finish that this week, and that's going to be an audiobook because I'm going to be traveling a bit, and so it'll be good to listen to. And then I also, on my Kindle, will try to finish The Flourishing Pastor by Tom Nelson. And so those are some of the books that I'm looking forward to finishing this week. What are you reading? What are you hoping to finish? What have you finished? What do you recommend? Leave a comment. And I love talking about books, so I'd love to hear what you love talking about books about. So I'll talk to you all later, and have a great week.